All right. Ready? 3, 2, 1, go. Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one. Love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your strength. These commandments that I give you today are to be upon your hearts. Impress them on your children. Talk about them when you sit at home, when you walk along the road, when you lie down, when you rise up. Tie them as symbols on your hands and bind them on your foreheads. Write them on the doorframes of your houses and your gates. Amen. Well done, you guys. Thank you. Remember, I've said this before, I'll say it again. When the Pharisee, it was a scribe that came up to Yeshua, came up to Jesus and said, "Teacher, what is the greatest commandments? What are the greatest commandments? What are we supposed to keep?" And then Jesus responded with this. He says, "Love the Lord your God with all your soul, with all your strength, and love your neighbors yourself." And the scribe was really impressed because the scribes and the Pharisees are always trying to test Jesus, try to test Yeshua. They're trying to get him to fall into a logical trap so that he can contradict himself and then therefore disprove the fact that he's the Son of God. But when the scribes saw this is an interesting scribe because most of them were people that were just legalistic people, no love for God whatsoever. They were all wrapped up in religion. And this guy was actually really impressed. Something was different about this guy's heart. He said, "Wow, you've answered wisely, teacher," meaning Rabbi Yeshua. "If you can love the Lord your God with all our heart, soul, strength, love your neighbor yourself, that's more important than all the burnt offerings." Meaning all the work that we do at the temple, all our busy work that we priests do, if you can do that, it's more important than any other. And then Jesus, "You are not far from the kingdom of heaven." It's one of the few times that you ever see Jesus saying something nice about the Pharisees, the religious leaders. Is, "You're not far from the kingdom of heaven." So if you guys can nail this, ladies and gentlemen, you're much further ahead than I would say 99% of the Christians, the churchy people. It's about loving your neighbors yourself. It's about loving your God. We're going to see this today in our final lesson on David here, because this was a man that was really, really in love with God. So today we've studied the life and the reign of David. And as we've seen that David had a very volatile life. Okay, the first half of his volatility, or the volatile life that he experienced, was really from the persecution of Saul. He was being and to overtake Saul's failing legacy. And the second half of David's life, the volatility of David's life, was the fallout from his sin. We saw that because he fell into the sin of what? What? Lust, yes, and then, which led to a greater sin, murder. Yeah, bingo. So he narrowly lost his kingdom, and he suffered a lot of painful repercussions as a result of his sin. So we spent a number of weeks on that, and many times when people talk about King David and read about King David, they only focus on Bathsheba, because that's a very prominent story. It is a big part because he messed up a lot. But that said, it's easy to overlook the good in King David and why it was that he's said to be a man after God's own heart. Now, to be sure, despite the fact that David sinned majorly, he was a mighty man of faith, and that never changed in his life. He was also a very man with mature faith. He sinned, but he still had a very mature faith. How so? Because he submitted to God's will in good times and significantly in bad times. So when things were going really, really bad, when son 1 was dead, son 2 was dead, son 3 was dead, and now soon to be son 4 was dead, he never doubted God. He never distrusted God. He never hated God. When he was running away from his third son, fleeing in the wilderness, he never shook his fist and says, "Why, God? How dare you?" Or got depressed and down. "You don't love me." No, he never did that. He just says, "Okay, this is you're working, God. I'm going to just submit to it." So last week we ended on the discussion, or the final message of David's season of judgment. So that was when we talked about the bad times for David as a result of his sin, and that's it. Today will be the final chapter that we discuss on King David. Then we're going to move on to something else. So today we enter the final years of David's life. We're going to discuss some significant elements and developments that happen in these latter years of his life. So for all the time that we spent on David's turmoil and his sins, again, I want to stress that it's really easy to overlook the significant developments that King David made for his kingdom. In fact, we all have heard the phrase that David was a man after God's own heart, right? But how many of you can tell us why that is? Tell me why. What things did he do specifically that made him a man after his own heart? Well, he had great faith. Okay, but what did he do? How many of you can answer that question? I bet you a lot of people in the church can answer that. You people in this audience would be closer because we've talked about some of it. But we're going to go into a little bit deeper today, some of the actual activities. David successfully, in partnership with God, he subdued the enemies of Israel. Okay, remember, Israel before he became king was still kind of it was a faction. It was like 12 divided tribes that were always quarrelsome. They were always kind of fighting with one another, not civil war things, but they were quarrelsome, they were competitive, and they weren't unified. So Israel was kind of a confederation of somewhat disparate tribes. So King David, what he was able to do is not only was he able to subdue his enemies, prevent foreign enemies from invading, he's able to unify the tribes into one unified nation. What's more, he conquered the famous city of the Jebusites, which later became Jerusalem, right? And he made that as the capital of Israel. That was something that no king, no judge was able to ever do. So for 400 years, there's no real. There was areas where that functioned kind of as the de facto capital, but not Jerusalem. David strategically chose Jerusalem because it was kind of centered in a place that was politically neutral, that the Judean tribe in the south would recognize, and the remaining tribes in the north would recognize. Okay, it's not biased towards one another. So he selected that, he made that his capital, and he centralized government. He centralized the whole administration, if you will, of Israel. And significantly, he also established centralized worship of God itself, of himself. Remember, this was a landscape of 12 confederate or fragmented tribes, but David unified them, and he got all of Israel to focus on one center, one God. Remember, David was a man that loved God, and remember when he was trying to bring the ark into Jerusalem, what was David doing? Was he, let's bring the ark in, Or what was he doing? Dancing, leaping from God. In fact, he was so ambitious about bringing the ark into Jerusalem, bringing his God into Jerusalem, that he did it improperly. He put it on a cart drawn by oxen, which you're not supposed to do. If you read the Bible, which David knew, which he did, you're supposed to have priests carry the ark very carefully. In fact, when David was such in a hurry to bring the ark in, one of the ox stumbled and the ark fell off the cart. Talk about impiety. And someone tried to prevent it from falling. That person died. Anyway, we're going to see today that King David did what most other kings in the Bible did not do. Kings, if you read about the book of Kings and the book of Chronicles, roughly there's about 20 kings in the north and 20 kings in the south. We were talking about this together last week. There were 7 kings that were good. Actually, it was 8 kings in the south that were good out of the 20, and there were 0 in the north. So that means that 80% of the kings that you read about in the book of Kings, the book of Chronicles, were all bad. They were all throwaways. They either practiced idolatry, worship of foreign pagan gods, or they brought in idolatry itself, like King Manasseh did in the north. So these kings were terrible. But not King David. King David did the polar opposite. He got the whole nation together and he said, focus on our God, the one God. No idolatry. King David, what he did is he tried to set up a household for God. He said, I want my God in Jerusalem. And so he brought the tabernacle in. He brought the ark in. Great. And he was able to get some standardized worship. They were able to get the tribes to look here, come to Jerusalem to worship. But he wasn't satisfied with that. Because David constructed a nice palace for himself. He was very happy. Very nice palace. He got to see Bathsheba. Nice views. But then he realized, wait a minute, what about my God? My God is still in a tent. This is not acceptable. I want a temple for my God. I want a temple where the priests can perform all their sacrificial offerings. I want a place where it's big enough where people can come and worship the one and the only God. Our God, the God that I love, the God that I was dancing before. But interesting enough, despite the fact that King David was a man after God's own heart, God said this to him about building the temple. Let's go to next slide here, 1 Chronicles. Hopefully you get it right. Can you go down? No? I'll read it. This is 1 Chronicles chapter 22. While Miss Sunny figures it out. Verses 7 to 8. There it is. Good. David said, I had in my heart to build a house for the name of the Lord my God. But the word of the Lord came to me and said this, David, you've shed too much blood and you have fought many wars. You shall not build a house for my name because you have shed too much blood in my sight. So interestingly, God wouldn't allow David to build the temple. Too much blood was on his hands. Someone else was going to have to do it. Okay, so this week we're going to conclude our study on David, and we're going to see that, actually what I'm going to try and do is I'm going to try and end the reign of King David on a very positive note, because we've talked about his sins forever and ever. But now we're going to spend most of our time in 2 Samuel chapter 24. Just a side note, the final 4 chapters, 21, 22, 23, 24, They're not in chronological order, and we don't know exactly when those events happened. We're reasonably certain that the events in chapter 24, which is going to be our focus today, occurred just before King David handed his reign off to the next one, to his successor, Solomon. Okay, so this is probably at the very end of his reign. So that said, I'm going to begin in briefly. I'm going to start read a couple verses in chapter 21. So 2 Samuel chapter 21. I just want to give you a highlight as to what David's like right now, what his status is like. Okay, so once again, there was a battle between the Philistines and Israel. And David went with his men to fight against the Philistines. Surprise, surprise, the Philistines are always rearing their heads. And he became exhausted. King David was really, really tired. And Ishbi-Benob, one of the descendants of Rapha, whose bronze spearhead weighed 300 shekels, basically a big, strong dude, came, and he went to kill King David. But Abishai, that's one of King David's generals, came down to David's rescue, and then he struck the Philistine down and killed him. And then when David's men saw this, that David was almost killed, they said, "You're not going into battle with us ever again, King David, no more. So that the lamp of Israel will not be extinguished." So what's happening here? David's nearly 70 years old now, got gray hair, he's older, he's more frail, and he almost lost his life. He almost got killed in the field of the Philistine. He had to be rescued. So even age has crept up on the mighty King David. So now he's asked to stay away from battle. And now King David is just getting older and older and older. So now, all right, maybe I'll take care of some things in Jerusalem, set my house in order before I pass the kingdom off to someone else. Well, once more, we have one interesting event. Like I said, I told you I was going to end today on a positive note with King David. But interestingly enough, the last chapter of Samuel, chapter 24, which ends the book, which ends Samuel, it ends on a note of sin. So even though I'm going to talk about something positive, we're going to talk about David's kind of final sin. Okay, so now we're going to be in our main text today. We're going to be in 2 Samuel chapter 24. Again, the anger of the Lord burned against Israel. Okay, notice right here, it says it burned against Israel. And then he incited, kind of goaded David, incited David against Israel, meaning them, Israel, saying, "Go and take a census of Israel and Judah." And so the king said to Joab and the army commanders with him, "Go throughout the tribes of Israel, from Dan to Beersheba," that means all of Israel basically, from all the way from the north to all the way to the south, "enroll the fighting men, so that I may know how many of us there are." And even Job was looking at this like, why do you want to do this, King David? Okay, so let's unpack this. For sins unstated, you can read all the Bible. It doesn't say what happens, what angered God. We don't really know what the Israelites did. But God was angry at the Israelites for something. And the text right here is actually kind of tricky to interpret, because if you read a parallel account of this, which is recorded in 1 Chronicles 21, it says that Satan incited David. But here it says God incited David to take a census. What's a census? Yep, counting on people. You guys ever been approached by a census counter guy? Happened to me once. It was actually, I was in Northern California, and I guess I was legally required to answer. A guy came, was a nice guy, and had a packet this thick, and he says, "We're doing a census. Do you have some time?" Okay, how long? 45 minutes. What? How many questions? I'm here. How many questions do you need to ask me? And then I couldn't deny it, but he said, you're supposed to legally take this, but I can come back later if you want. And I said, yeah, let's do it later. He never came back again, so I was, whatever. So he was doing a count of all of Israel. God says, or Satan, whoever, said, "Go take account of all the men of Israel." Now, it's unclear as to who did the count. Was it God saying do the count, or was it Satan doing the count? And commentators have tried to reconcile this by saying, well, God doesn't cause David to sin, but maybe he might use an instrument to punish someone else. So, for example, when God was punishing the Israelites for sin, he would raise up the Assyrians or the Babylonians to punish them. Or when he wanted to test Job, he asked Satan to go do something. So the point here is that maybe God used Satan or allowed Satan to cause David to count the census. At any rate, God was angry with the Israelites, and so something in David's heart says, let's go count all the people, okay? Let's go count all the people. So God wasn't pleased with this count either. This was something that God didn't want David to do, but he allowed David to do. Why this was done, we're going to find out. The Bible's not very clear here, but again, this is a little bit of tricky text. I'm going to try and help you out here. Let's go to verse 4. So the king's word, however, overruled Joab. Joab asked him, why are you going to do this census? This doesn't make any sense. And the king, David says, we're going to do it. So he overruled Joab and the army and the commanders. And so they left the presence of the king to enroll the fighting men of Israel. And after the crossing the Jordan, they camped near Aurora in the south town. I won't go through all this, but in a word, what the census counter did is this. They went east, and then they went in a counterclockwise motion up to the north, up to the west, and to the south. So they circled the whole land. It took about 8 months. So they went around counting. I want to stress again, God did not want King David to do a census. Something went in David's heart. Maybe Satan put something in his heart. Go count the men. God didn't want him to do this. And at the same time, God was angry at the Israelites for something. Okay? So just keep these two things. God's angry at two people now. King David for making the census, and the Israelites for something we don't know. Got it? God's angry at two people. Two entities, if you will. Verse 8. After they had gone through the entire land, counterclockwise motion, and they came back to Jerusalem at the end of 9 months, Joab reported the number of the fighting men. In Israel, there were 800,000 able-bodied men who could handle a sword, and in Judah, there was 500,000. So the census is concluded. Here's your number. What next? Verse 10. And then after the census, after David got his number, his conscience was really stricken. He was really, really bothered by this. After he counted the fighting men. And he said to the Lord, I have sinned greatly in what I have done. Now, Lord, I beg you, take away the guilt of your servant. I have done a very foolish thing. So David realizes that he wasn't supposed to do a census. Now, why going out and conducting a census is a great sin, I don't know, and the Bible's not really clear, but we get a little bit of a hint here. David says he sinned greatly. He in his mind, he did something really, really wrong. What exactly was that sin? Again, it's not stated, but we get a little bit of a hint from the text. It says, David went out and he counted the able-bodied men, meaning the people that can go conduct war. The strong men, not the women, the children, anyone else, just the strong men. So what it suggests here is that David maybe had some pride in his heart, and he wanted to go out and see how powerful his kingdom was, and how strong he was, and he was relying more on that than he was on God. His faith basically a pride of the heart issue. There are other theories, but that's probably the most likely one. So God was really displeased with this census, and at the same time, he was angry at the Israelites for something. So David realizes, oh my gosh, I've sinned. My sin is going to cause the Israelites to suffer something. Verse 13. So Gad, that's a prophet, that was a friend of David's, went to David and said to him, I've heard from the Lord, King David. You've sinned against the people. You've sinned against God, and then because of your census, I'm going to give you a choice here of punishment. Shall there come on you 3 years of famine in your land, or 3 months from fleeing from your enemies, option number 2, or option number 3, 3 days of plague in your land? Now then, think it over. Which punishment do you want? And decide how I shall answer the one who sent me. So Prophet Gad comes over and said to David, you have 3 options. Tell me which punishment you want for your sin, and I'll go tell God which one you want. And then David said to Gad, I'm in deep distress. Let us fall into the hands of the Lord, for his mercy is great, but do not let me fall into human hands. God, please, I've sinned. David knows he's in a big pinch now. Again, I want to state the nature of the census sin is not fully clear. It's maybe a pride thing. And the sin of the Israelites, we don't know what they did. But God offered 3 types of punishments. What's a famine? 3 years of a famine. What's that?
Starving.
Shortage of food. Maybe you're no rain, your crops are dying, you can't feed your people. Starving is a miserable way to die. I mean, I've read accounts of people that have tried to... Actually, there's an interesting book. It's called Guests of the Ayatollah. It's when the Iranian Muslims came in and stormed the U.S. embassy in 1978, and they took over the State Department. There's a bunch of Americans in there, and some Americans were trying to cope with being. I think they were in the hostage situation for about 400 days or something like that, maybe 450 days. Some of the Americans tried to starve themselves to get out of this. They just, I don't want to do this anymore, I'm going to die. And after a few days of not eating, they couldn't handle it. They said, no, we'll be hostages again. Dying without food is a miserable way to die. So 3 years of famine is one option. Or you can have 3 months of being pursued by our enemies, maybe by the Philistines or whatever. Or you can have 3 days of a plague. What's a plague? Disease. A disease. So which one do you want? Meaning you'll inflict some sort of disease on your people and will kill your people. Now, who's the punishment? What's the punishment going to affect? Which people? Is it just David? All the Israelites, right? Does this seem fair? It's David's sin of the census. Why is he punishing the Israelites? Bingo. Remember I said God was mad at the Israelites for something, right? Now David sins, this sin with the census stunt. So what God is doing is he's using David's sin. He's going to punish David's sin on the Israelites. But really what he's doing is punishing the Israelites for their sin. So the ultimate reason for God sending all this punishment is because he was angry at the Israelites for something. And he was doing it through David's sin. It wasn't because David's sin that brought this on. God was already angry at the Israelites for something. But David went and sinned, so God decided to work through this sin. So he was using this time to punish the Israelites. So really this wasn't like God being mean. The Israelites had sinned against him. Okay, verse 15. So the Lord, I guess King David chose option 3. He sent a plague on Israel. So this is going to go on for 3 days, a disease. So he's going to disease the people. That morning until the end of the time designated, and 70,000 people from Dan to Beersheba, means throughout the land, died. And when the angel stretched out his hand to destroy Jerusalem, okay, so it was going all over the land first, now it was getting closer and closer to Jerusalem, even the Lord did this. Look what the Lord did. He said, he stretched out his hand and relented concerning the disaster. He said to the angel, withdraw your hand. Even God had to say, stop the plague, don't touch Jerusalem, it's that bad. And then the angel of the Lord was then at the threshing hold of Araunah, I'll go there in a moment, Jebusite. Verse 17. And when David saw the angel who was striking down the people, he said to the Lord, I have sinned. The shepherd has done no wrong. These are but the sheep. What have they done? Let your hand fall on me and my family. So David's surveying the lands. He's seeing outside Jerusalem, people are dropping like flies. Everyone's dying. Family members, all that, are getting afflicted. And he realizes, oh my God, this is my sin. But little does David know is actually God is also punishing the Israelites for their sin, unspecified sin. David's freaking out. Please stop it. Stop it, Lord. Stop it, Lord. Stop it, Lord. Put the plague on me. Put the plague on my family. So in the midst of a catastrophic plague, it's so bad that God has to say, don't go into Jerusalem. And David now, he's panicking and he's offering his own family up. That's a big thing, because remember how much David loved his family. Remember how much he loved that wicked Absalom? He was weeping, oh my son, oh my son, oh my son. But here King David is offering up even his own family. That goes to show you how much David loves his countrymen. Okay, and finally, verse 18. On that day, Gad went to King David and said to him, go and build an altar to the Lord on the threshing floor of Araunah the Jebusite. So David went up, as the Lord commanded, through the prophet Gad, went up to this place called Araunah. Actually, that's the name of a person, so we're not fully sure who the person is. All we know is a Jebusite, maybe a local lord or ruler or something. We don't know. So he looked up and he saw the king and his officials coming down towards him, and he went and he bowed down before King David and faced the ground. Okay, so what's a threshing floor? You guys know what that is?
It's for processing wheat.
Yeah, very good. Correct. King David's freaking out. The plague is killing a lot of people. God, what do I do? Prophet God says, here's what you need to do. Go up to the threshing floor. It's up on a ledge, a cliff, higher region. Threshing floor is kind of it can be like usually a flat surface, a flat floor. What people will do, farmers will do, is they'll get like wheat seeds or barley seeds, dump them on the ground, okay? And they'll take some sort of blunt instrument, maybe a whip or something hard, whack the ground really hard so that you'll cause the seeds to break. The shell will break off of the seed. Okay, so that's called the seed part that's useless for farmers is called chaff. So you have seeds and chaff mixed on the ground together. What people do is they'll take it, scoop it in their hands, they'll wait for a gust of wind, and they'll throw it up in the air so that the wind will blow away the lighter shells, the chaff, leaving only the seeds that you can plant in the ground, used for food or whatever. Okay, those would fall, and they would repeat the process till they get all the seeds. Hence the phrase, "I'll separate the wheat from the chaff." You remember that phrase? It's in the Bible, yeah. Okay, so David's supposed to go up there and buy a place like. Actually, I have a picture of it. Go. Let me see if I put it in here. Go to the next slide if you have it. Something like this. So you see people, farming seeds. Okay. Go, David, up there, buy that place, and then build an altar. Verse 21. And then Araunah said, "Why has my lord the king come to his servant? To buy a threshing floor," said King David. "I need to buy this place so I can build an altar to the Lord. If I do this, the plague will be stopped." Verse 22. And then Araunah said to David, "Let my lord the king take whatever he wishes and offer it up. Here are the oxen for the burnt offering, and here are the threshing sledges and the ox for the yoke." Wow, he's giving him everything for a sacrifice. "Your Majesty," Araunah gives all this to the king. "May the Lord your God accept you." So here we have a very nice gentleman, Araunah, who says, not only can you buy it, I'm going to give you this threshing floor. I'm going to give you the ox for, what's a burnt offering? You guys remember that one? What's the significance of that?
Everything up. Is it everything burned?
Yes. Bingo. So unlike some of the sacrifices where you take out the fat and burn it and leave some of the meat over for the priests, for a burnt offering, it was you would burn everything. Nothing was left behind. It was a total devotion for the Lord. It's kind of the most extreme sacrifice you can offer. Like you're giving everything to God. It's like you'd offer it in the most extreme cases. Okay? So he goes up. He's offered all this to the king. But then notice King David's reply here, verse 24. But the king replied to Araunah, "No, I insist paying you for this. No, I'm going to pay you for this. I will not sacrifice to the Lord my God burnt offerings that cost me nothing." Okay? So David bought the threshing floor and the oxen, paid 50 shekels of silver for them. David built an altar to the Lord there, sacrificed burnt offerings and fellowship offerings, and then the Lord answered his prayer on behalf of the land, and finally the plague stopped. The plague stopped. People stopped dying. People that were sick, maybe they recovered or whatever. So in the end, the solution was to go build an altar and offer sacrifices on this threshing floor. That stopped the plague. Nothing else would work. Burnt offerings were to be offered, which King David did for consumption, for atonement for the sins. And interesting enough, David says, no. I'm going to pay you for this. Don't give it to me. I have to pay you for it. Why so? Because David realized that in his sin, atonement for God is not going to be free. I shouldn't be doing this for free. It's going to cost me something. Sin always costs something. Now, I want to say something here. It's important. It's a subtle point. In the verses we just read here, it says that David bought the threshing floor, right? 50 shekels. Now, what's not recorded here, you have to turn to 1 Chronicles chapter 21. I actually have the verse up here, but I want to take you to 1 Chronicles chapter 21, verse 25. Next slide. So David, okay, here it is. So David, this is a parallel account of what happened here, paid Araunah 600 shekels of gold for the site. And David built an altar to the Lord there and offered his sacrifices. So here it says he paid 600 shekels of gold. In the other place it says he only paid 50 shekels of gold. How do you reconcile this? And why is this important? Because David bought the threshing floor for 50 shekels. Okay, that's his land now. But then over here, it's recorded as him also buying a larger portion of land, a bigger site area. So it wasn't just a threshing floor. David bought a lot more land from this guy. What's significant about the site? Why do we care about this? Well, the site that King David purchased was a site that's believed to be the place that we read in Genesis where Melchizedek, Melech Tzedek, offered a sacrifice to God. It's also believed to be the site where Abraham offered Isaac up as a sacrificial offering to God. And, drum roll, next slide. It's also the site where Solomon's temple would later be built, and later King Herod's temple would be, Herod's temple would be built. And today, this is what it looks like. Next slide. Anyone remember that? That's what King David bought. That's what God told him to buy. It wasn't just a random threshing floor. It was a very strategic area. It was a very important area, a very holy area that God would later use. This is believed to be the area where Christ will return. Not just a trivial place, right? See that? Okay. So despite the sin of the people of the Israelites, and despite David's sin, God was working through all this sin, all this, to establish his holy central place of worship. This is going to be believed to be the future place that we'll go and worship God, where God will dwell on the earth. God worked through the sinful but the obedient and God-fearing David to draw Israel to a central place of worship. And God worked through David to literally establish the foundations of what would later become the temple. So yes, King David did sin majorly, bigly, but when compared to the good that God did through David, despite his sins, it's kind of easy to see, or it's easier to see why David was labeled as the man after God's own heart. David was uniquely sensitive to God and loved God so much that he did everything in his power to usher in God. And God says, okay, yes, I hear your heart. I love your heart. I'm going to establish a centralized worship. You can't build the temple, okay? But I'm going to use you to start laying the foundations of it. You're going to buy it. You're going to buy the area. Your son Solomon is going to build the temple. So it might seem kind of unfair, kind of sad that maybe David, who did so much for God, unified, centralized worship, got all the Israelites to come to here to worship. Actually, go back up one slide, yeah. Because this is what the Israelites would have, well, not later. This is Solomon's temple was built, and then that was later destroyed, and then the smaller temple was rebuilt, and then that was leveled, taken down, and Herod rebuilt this. So in Jesus' time, this is what the Israelites were doing. This is what Jesus said, this is my Father's house. Why are you guys making a den of thieves? It's a holy, holy site, and this is the place where the first church gathered. Remember that in Acts? There's no building, or there was no church building walls. So what the first apostles would do is they would meet probably right here in the courtyards, and they would talk about Jesus, Yeshua, the place that David had bought about 2 millennia, or what is it, about 1,000 years earlier. See, God works in mysterious ways and through sin to do great things for the kingdom. Now, I want to highlight just a couple more things on King David. Again, really, I want to end on a positive note on why it was that David was said to be a man after God's own heart. David sinned bigly, but he established a unified kingdom, and he got the people, all the Israelites, to focus their attention and worship in one location, unlike most of the other kings that were bringing in idolatry. Okay, let's go to the next two slides. So this is going to be a 2 Samuel chapter 7. I want you to listen to what God thought about King David, or what God was going to do to bless King David for King David doing all the good things for God. Listen to this. Now I will make your name great, King David, like the names of the greatest men on earth. The Lord declares to you that the Lord himself will establish a house for you. And when your days are over and you rest with your ancestors, I will raise up your offspring who succeed you, your own flesh and blood, and I will establish a kingdom, or his kingdom. Whose kingdom? Some descendant of King David. Verse 14. I will be his father, and he will be my son. When he does wrong, I will punish him with a rod wielded by men, with floggings inflicted with human hands, but my love will never be taken away from him, as I took it away from Saul, whom I removed before you. Your house, King David, and your kingdom will endure forever. Your throne will be established forever. So David wasn't allowed to build a house for God, and he purchased land for it, but his dynasty, his household, God says, you can't build a house for me, but I'm going to build a house for you and out of you, King David. Meaning a dynasty. I'm going to establish a dynasty. Your descendants are going to rule forever. Or maybe a descendant is going to be king forever. Who's that? Yeshua. Bingo. That was an easy one, right? So David's descendant would be fathered by God himself. And by extension of that, David is being incorporated into the family of God. Talk about a reward. So David, of course, would become the distant ancestor of Yeshua, Jesus himself. Talk about an honor. Talk about a reward for being a man after God's own heart. So yes, David was prevented from being able to temple himself, but he was awarded the honor of entering into the family of God. I want to read you, here's a psalm here. See if you can make sense of this. This is Psalm chapter 2. It's only 2 verses. I have installed my a king on Zion. What's Zion? That's Jerusalem, the Jerusalem area. My holy mountain. Someone interpret that verse for me. I have installed my king on Mount Zion. What does that mean? Who's done that? David. Didn't he established what? He bought land, established the foundations for where a temple would later be built. I have installed, meaning he brought his king into Jerusalem. Who brought the king into Jerusalem? Who brought the God in Jerusalem? David. Had a tabernacle first, then an ark, and now he's bought the land, which will later become the place for the temple. I will proclaim the Lord's decree. You are my son, today I have become your father. So what's David saying here? I've built your house in Jerusalem, Lord, and today I have become your son. So God said to him, I am your father, you're my son. So God's incorporated him into the family of God. So in closing our story here on Samuel, we end with our study here of David on a supremely positive note. David's writing here, this is written by David, saying, I have become a son of God. My descendants, my kingdom is going to last forever. So despite David's horrendous sins, David sought God ferociously in his life. He was a man after God's own heart. David's faith and his trust in God was his crowning achievement and his saving, redeeming feature. That's what got him through the dark years, and this is what God blessed him with. Now, I want you to take a moment here and ask yourselves, what if you all had the same kind of heart that King David had? What if you had that kind of faith and that kind of trust that David had? What if you had that zeal, that love? I'm not talking about a religious, guilt-driven heart after God. I'm talking about one that just loves God, who will leap and dance for God, who wants to bring God's house, God's presence into his house. Imagine that. God, can I bring you into my house? Can I bring you into my house? I'm so excited to do it that I mess things up along the way. This was King David's heart. He was in a ferocious race to get God into Jerusalem and to get all of the tribes of Israel to worship God. That's what David's heart was. That's why he was a man after God's own heart. I want my God in my house, and I want all people, I want all my kinsmen whom I would die for to come worship our God. That was the king. That's why David is recorded as being the greatest king Israel had. Unlike the other kings, I like this woman, I'm going to have multiple women. I still will worship you, God, but there's a lot of other gods out here that will answer my prayers quicker. Let's relax a little bit. We don't have to have worship right here in Jerusalem. We can have it in other places. We can have it on high places. We can erect some shrines here, and we can have a polytheistic society where everyone gets along. Not David. No. I want my God in my house, and I want everyone worshiping him. That's King David's heart. So imagine what the church would look like. Imagine what your lives would look like if you kind of had that heart after God. I want him in my house. I want everyone to worship him like I do. I want people to see what I see in him. Imagine what would happen if we truly observe the Shema, which we just read before we started here. Love the Lord your God with all your heart. That's what King David did. That's really the thrust behind the Shema and why we say it. God says, just love me, and love your neighbors as yourself. And then you're going to see radical blessing, radical connection with me. So today's message in closing here, unlike prior weeks, is we were preaching about how to not fall into David's sins. But today, that was a call not to sin, but today was a call to be like David, to emulate David. Emulate means to copy or to excel. To excel what? Into loving God even more than he did. If you can do that, ladies and gentlemen, all listeners here, expect great things from God. King David probably didn't know that was going to become later the temple, and then later probably the most holy site in the world. King David didn't know early in his reign that he would probably have a dynasty that would last forever, or that he'd be the ancestor of the king of the universe. So imagine, ladies and gentlemen, if we have that heart for King David, what God will do with each and every one of you. Imagine, you can move mountains with that. So I'm going to close there. I'm going to pray right now. And let's ask ourselves, just take a moment, ask yourselves if you want that heart. And if you don't, that's okay. Say, God, help me to want that. I know it's probably the right thing, but you have to make that choice in your heart yourself. So, Heavenly Father, we lift this up. And I ask, Lord, that you open up all the hearts here in this room and all those that will view us later to open their hearts to you and ask themselves the question, Do I want that heart? Can I have that heart? Can I have that heart, Lord? I don't have it. My flesh is in the way. I have my own idols in my own life, Lord, but I can't break free of that. I need your help. If you want that, just take a moment and say yes in your heart. Say, Lord, I want that relationship with you. I want the heart that King David had. Please give that to me, because I can't do it. You can't manufacture it. Let's take a moment here. And so if you done that, wonderful job. God will honor that. Our hearts are always going to be imperfect, and we can ask and ask, even have with mixed motives, but do the best you can. And if you don't have a relationship with God, if you need the Christ in your heart, just say, Yeshua, I've blown it. I've sinned. Please come into my life. Be my Lord, my King. I say yes right now to the best of my ability. That's all you have to do. He'll take it, again, on the thinnest of yeses. If you've already accepted Christ, you don't have to do it again and again. Just say thank you for him accepting you before. You don't need to get resaved. And so, Heavenly Father, I know that there's people in this room that have said yes for something in their heart to you, Lord. And so I pray, Lord, that you'll honor that. And I thank you for that, Lord. I pray, Lord, that you will honor, answer that, grant people the desires of their heart, and give us a heart like King David, so that we can all too be said to be men and women after God's own heart. Help us have that, Lord, and help us to see that there will be blessing that comes with that. It's not just an empty devotion, Lord. You reward that. You will reward that. And pray this in Yeshua's name. Amen. So let's close with the Aaronic benediction. Okay, receive this blessing, ladies and gentlemen. This is for you. Yevarechecha Adonai v'yishmerecha, Ya'el Adonai panav elecha v'yuchanecha, Yisa Adonai panav elecha v'yasim lecha shalom. The Lord bless you and keep you. The Lord make his face shine upon you and be gracious to you. The Lord lift up his countenance on you and give you peace. God bless you all. See you all next week. Thank you.